Amazing. Welcome everyone for this month's Tech for Good Thursday. We're so glad you're here and we celebrate you every day, especially so today. Thank you for joining us. And if you're new to World Pulse, we welcome you to our vibrant global community. Please make sure you're muted so everyone can hear clearly, and you can always answer the Zoom poll and say hello in the chat. Feel free to click the CC button at the bottom of your screen to turn on live captioning on this call. Before we get started, we want you to know that we take your privacy and security very seriously. Don't hesitate to stay off video for your privacy, and you may change your name if you'd like to avoid being identified. We do take a few photos that go on our social media, and these sessions are being recorded. We at World Pulse are on a mission to create a world where our community thrives, one click, one comment, one connection at a time. We envision a future where everyone believes in the power of her own voice and uses it to build a world where all life thrives. We strongly believe that when our community's voices are heard and connected, they transform the world for the better. We are inclusive and we are intersectional. We believe a world where all women thrive is a world where everyone thrives. World Pulse strives to be a safe, supportive, and brave space for women and for all who support gender justice to catalyze our mission. We celebrate the unique attributes, characteristics, and perspectives of every person. At the same time, we are facilitating space to amplify women's voices and build a community that values, respects, and cares for every individual. When you join our global social network, you're joining a worldwide community of voices that are speaking out and lifting each other up. Add your voice, connect with a growing and passionate community, and build solidarity with your fellow community members across the globe. You must be wondering who you have here with us today. I'm Rasika, facilitating today's session and having been a member at World Pulse since 2022. You're absolutely welcome to connect with me and learn more about World Pulse anytime. Today, I'm joined by Martha Lawrence, our Executive Affairs Administrator, and Tiffany Hutton, our Operations Associate, to support us all on chat and Q&A. Some of you are meeting us for the first time, and we're very excited for this opportunity for all of you to get to know more of us from World Pulse better. Thank you, Tiffany, and thank you so much, Martha, for all your support in making our Tech for Good Thursdays so seamless. Today's topic is how to set your AI model. We'll introduce it more fully in a moment, and after the presentation, our community cafe begins. We invite you to bring your questions, insights, and experiences in this segment so we can all learn together. Today, we will hear from two of our Global Advisory Network members. Jelle van den Berg and Mallory Swordglenn are here with us to talk to us about how to set up your AI model, integrate agents, and do this responsibly. Welcome, Jelle and Mallory. We're so glad you're here, and we're looking forward to hearing from you. Morgan, I leave the floor to you as you introduce the speakers for today.
Thank you so much, Rasika. Yes, we are joined by two of our Global Advisory Network members here today. Our Global Advisory Network is World Pulse's strategic advisory group of specialists, advocates, and supporters. And we are thrilled to bring in Mallory from Okta, which representing our product marketing leader for us, and Jelle from Cushman and Wake as a tech risk professional. And I will turn the floor over to you both. If you would kindly give us a brief introduction of yourselves and your background, and we're looking forward to hearing what you have to share today.
Cool, I can kick us off. So like Morgan said, my name is Mallory Swordglenn. Have been involved with World Pulse for about a year and a half now. Really excited to be here today to just get a little closer to, the community members and talk a little bit about, how you can use AI and like the safety side of that and how to use it responsibly. And I'll hand it over to Jelle to do his part.
Yeah, no, equally excited to be here. Newer to the team. Like it was mentioned a little bit before, my background is in technology risk, and the reason I'm talking to you guys today is in my work we try to make sure that we use AI in the right way and responsibly, and so hoping to convey that message a little bit today. Shall I share my screen, Morgan, and kick us off?
That would be great.
Okay. I think it's visible. Is that fair to say?
Now it is, yes.
Okay, perfect. So 4 main topics that we're hoping to cover today is a little bit of an introduction on AI agents and artificial intelligence altogether, and then highlight what we're trying to achieve or the goal of today's session. Then we'll deep dive into those agents, discuss how to use them responsibly, how to best think about some of the risks that do come with them, and then share some practical examples that maybe get everybody thinking about their use cases. What we did want to do is get a little bit of an understanding, and I don't know if we have a ton of people that can do the poll this way, but if it's possible to show when we think about AI and what is our starting point, are we curious, are we a little bit cautious, or are we maybe very excited about it? Would be good to know so we can potentially tailor the discussion. And Morgan, is it better to do it in the chat or through the poll?
So I think we are running the poll,
Okay.
but I just responded. But you can also enter it in the chat, whatever you're more comfortable with.
And if I may, we don't speak to from the people that are not here, but this is recorded, and we usually get over 100 members viewing all our trainings in recorded sessions. And I would say that there is a mixture of the 3 of them across the community. And
So we'll tailor it that way.
yeah. So it would be really great to have this conversation together. But yeah.
Excellent. So what I would hope from today's session, that's the goal, at least what we're trying to achieve, is to understand some of the tools that are out there to use the AI agents, to see how you can best use it for your use cases. And then, like we said, understand what you should consider when doing so. And maybe the conclusion is that you might not be fully ready to use the AI agents today, but maybe then start to think about some of the things that are required, like the data or the infrastructure to do so in the future. And then all together, do it as our community, share your voice, and ensure that we learn from each other. So before we can build, it's probably good to understand a little bit how the technology works. And the key thing or the difference with those AI agents or artificial intelligence, that it is not like a calculator, always the same. 2 + 2 is always 4. So it's not deterministic. But what it does is it's using math and it's using statistics to come up with a probability. So we'll explain this a little bit further, but even with agents, the large language models, which is, ChatGPT or Claude, people might know, or Gemini, those are still the basic, the logic. And how those models work is it's determining based on your input, what is the best probable answer. So it starts with the word "the," and then it thinks, I probably think based on my training that I should use the next word is world instead of apple or sky or whatever it could be. So when really you break it down, it's all about statistics and probability, how these models work. And what comes with that is throughout, you will see a theme that sometimes it can be wrong, right? Because it's not 2 + 2 is always 4. So we need to ensure that we keep that in mind, that it can, this is called hallucinate, to give you a wrong answer. And then throughout, we'll talk about all the great things that we can do with AI agents or AI in general. But it's good to consider some risks. And the framework that is sometimes used is called COSO. But what more important is what those risks could be. And the first one to consider is that we need good data. We need to either train the model or you give it the information that it needs. If you don't give it the right information, unfortunately, the outcome will also not be as good. We talked about already the hallucination, or that it should be reliable. Another thing is sometimes it's correct, but we can't explain it. So that's not used for us as well. Then there are concerns or risks related to security and privacy. But again, there's ways that can be managed or mitigated. So not all risks are dangerous, right? It's just something to be aware about. Another one is that it should be free of bias and be fair. So an example of this is that some AI models were excellent in understanding what is a wolf or what is a husky. But as soon as they put a wolf in the snow, the AI model still said it was a wolf. And they put a husky in the forest, and it said it was a wolf. So, we need to make sure that there's no bias and it's always correct. Then, because we give our data to third parties, again, there are some security and privacy concerns to consider. And ultimately, somebody needs to be accountable for the AI system. So those are the risks. They can be covered. So it's just awareness. And at the same time, there is an environmental cost. So I would say the message is, use AI, but consider to use it in the most efficient way. And maybe don't use tools or methods that are top of the line if you can do it in a more simplistic way. So potentially, people have experimented with normal standard AI. So that is, I give it a prompt. I ask one of the chatbots, Google Gemini or Claude, and it gives me an answer. So for example, where should I go on vacation? And then it looks up on the internet or the data it's trained with to say, maybe Italy is a nice spot. But then it waits for the next action. So it's a prompt, it answers it, and then it stops. The difference with those agentic AI or the agents is that the models, so those large language models, are now smart enough if we give them the right tools to have a goal and to reason. So if I would ask a normal chatbot to say, based on the number of vacation days I have and the weather, where should I go? It probably won't give the right answer because it doesn't know how many vacation days you have. It doesn't know when you can take them. And then with that, what the right environment or the weather will be in a certain part of the world. So the underlying logic of an agent is still that large language model. But now we give it some tools. So the agent is allowed to look at a database where you can see how many vacation days I have. It's allowed to connect with the weather app to see in what part of the world it will be nice weather. And you allow it to basically think longer and use memory to then determine, before I give my answer, have I looked at all the tools that I have access to? Do I have taken into account everything that I need to? And then come with an answer. So the difference is that we allow it to think longer. We give it a memory so it can iterate, it can react, and it uses tools to come up with that action. I understand it might be still a little bit abstract. So there's certainly a use case where we would show you this. But that's the main difference between the AI that maybe people have already tried And some people might have already tried agents as well, but the AI that basically blew up a couple years ago, it's a prompt and an answer versus an agent has a goal and can act on that. So there's two ways to then start with your agents. There is the coded way that is typically a little bit harder. You need to have programming skills. You need to have the infrastructure, the IT infrastructure to set it up. Or newer is the no-code agents. That these are tools that are out there, sometimes for a fee, sometimes free, to basically use a visual drag and drop or instructions to build your agents. We'll focus more on the no code because that might be more appropriate for the audience that we're in. Here are some platforms that could help you with setting up your agents. And I can say that Make, although the starting price here is listed, is free for approved non-for-profits. So Make is free for a year. All the other ones have discounts. So Claude, I think, is 75% discount, and others have 25% discount. There's also some strengths to each of them. So if you, for example, think, well, I really need to be very complex, maybe consider something from OpenAI. Or if you're very new to it and you don't feel that comfortable, Zapier might be a good one. All of them have some compliance reports, which we'll explain in a minute. But Lindy and Claude are sometimes, people are a fan of them for their compliance or safety. Given that Make is free for a year for approved nonprofits, we have a little bit of a demo to show you. So I'm hoping that it switches to this screen over here, but do let me know if it's not showing this yellow screen.
Yes, we see the yellow screen in Claude.
Excellent, excellent. So what I asked it is, I set up an account with Make AI, and I said, can you help me build an AI agent by connecting my account and answer your questions?
Oh,
so it's
yellow.
Sure. Yep.
We have a pop-up on the bottom right, yes, corner. Yeah,
yeah
perfect.
yeah,
Thank you.
So it said, sure, I can do that. It asked me some questions. The main one was, what should your agent be doing? So what I told the AI is, I would like an agent that helps me if I have a new donor to draft a personalized thank you note, to send me a reminder if there's a 1-year anniversary, and then throughout the year, based on my impact, send them also personalized updates. So that is basically what I prepared and shared. So the AI said, or Claude said, yeah, certainly. I think you need 3 agents, and in Make that is called a scenario. So there's a new donor with a thank you email. I will monitor the anniversaries, and I will give it a quarterly update. Then it did all this work in the background. I sometimes had to click a button to say yes or no. And then ultimately it said, what is your structure of your data, which I chose to be Google Sheets. And really what I wanted to show is I didn't do anything in Make, and it built the agent for me. So the way this is set up, and that's why I mentioned earlier that data is important and the logic is important, is anytime a new donor is added to my Google Sheet, but this could also be any accounting system, or it could be any other database that you have that you use to add your donors. It is determining, hey, is there a 1-year anniversary? So that's the iterator. Then it's going to ask the AI, the large language model, can you help draft me an anniversary note? And then it sends it through the connected Gmail account. Now you can certainly consider adding a step here where you're saying before it's sent, can you every day give me the draft email and I will send them? So depending on the level of comfort and depending on how difficult the task is, we want to consider putting a human somewhere in this process. Now, to maybe hopefully make it a little bit more concrete still for people, what Claude built for me using my instructions in the free make tool looks similar to if I would create a new scenario. And hopefully the technology works with us. That's always the questions with a real live demo. So what it basically did is it said, I have a starting point. You know, what is the starting point of what I want the agent to do? So maybe another example is somebody is putting a message in the Slack messaging tool. So maybe it's watching my channel. And then potentially somebody says something interesting, then I want to act on that. So maybe from there, I'm going to look up on the internet and I'm going to ask the large language model, hey, what do you think of this? And then based on that large language model, I will go through this in a second. Based on that large language model, I'm going to populate something in my Google Sheet. So that is basically what Claude thought for me and built in the Make tool. Now, the key piece is that you would have to set up some of the connections. So what sheet do I want populated? And the good thing is that there's a lot of trainings. I know this is supposed to train you, but unfortunately each tool is a little bit different. But there's a lot of, each tool has a training that I think is pretty intuitive to use. So the purpose of today is to show you what potentially is possible, some of the considerations, to see if you like it, and then start to get familiar with the tools. So going back to the presentation here is the key piece is with getting this correct is thinking out the steps and then the underlying data, right? If we don't have good sources of when a new donor is received, the AI won't work. So even if you're saying today, maybe I'm not ready for deploying an agent, then start to consider, and Mallory will come to this also later on in the presentation, but start to consider where could I best use it, and then start to collect maybe the data that you need to. I think I'll hand it over to you, Mallory, and I can do the slides if you like.
You can hand it over to me. I'll drive them.
Okay. Yep.
Let me get into the right mode, share screen. All right, so just stop me if you can't see it. Let me actually go to this, go back to the beginning.
It's visible.
Look good?
Yep.
Okay, cool. All right, so we just saw kind of how to go through, like how you would actually make these agents. But I think as Jelle mentioned, there's, a lot of things to be aware of when you're working with AI. I say working with AI because I think that's one of the most important takeaways here is really just, you're making AI work for you, but how do you also use it as like a thought partner? So everything we're gonna talk about in the rest is really about how to use AI responsibly, how to use it in a secure way, and how to just be aware of the tool that you're working with. And that'll all rest on these three pillars that you're seeing here. So first is all about how do you protect the stories and data that any of your communities or people trust you with. Oftentimes, we might be, or you might be the only ones documenting what's actually happening on the ground. So how do you protect that? Second is making sure that everything AI produces is actually true before you actually act on that information or do anything with it. AI can sound really confident when it's making things up. And then third, keeping those authentic voices of yourself and of your communities and of the people you're working with and for at the center of everything you're doing. I think the power of the World Pulse community is really that it comes from real people sharing very real experiences that are happening. And so you don't want to let AI kind of sand off the edges and make those stories, less powerful or less real. So if we dive into that first one, right, like how do you actually go about protecting that sensitive data? You could think of this as maybe like sensitive data could be the obvious things, right? Like personal information or things like that. It could also be like a survivor's story, right? It could be contact information for a community member. I think a good rule to keep in mind, right, is like if you wouldn't want a journalist kind of getting their hands on this information and publishing it out for the world to see, it's best to probably consider that information as sensitive data and just treat it as such. And one thing to know is that sensitive data like this really does not belong in a public AI tool like ChatGPT or Gemini. So when you put anything in those tools, that data is going to become part of the training set for that LLM. And so even if you delete it later from your account, really that company already has access to that data and it can use that to actually train its LLM. And so if you're putting in, a sensitive story or sensitive information, that data is now ready for a commercial tool. So what can you do instead? Well, you can keep that sensitive data outside the tool, and it's kind of easy to do that, right? Like instead of maybe putting in a direct story from someone that has some personally identifiable information, you kind of anonymize that. You could say like, hey, I want to I have a story about maybe lands right issues, and I want to walk through how to structure that for international donors, right? So AI can kind of help you think through that strategy. It doesn't need all the details to actually do that. Second, like I mentioned earlier, is really using AI as a partner and not necessarily as a fact checker. So what I talked about is that AI can and will make things up. So for example, one thing that could happen, maybe an organization's grant research agent. So, y'all just walk through making an agent. Maybe that agent goes out and it finds a grant, but it finds a grant that doesn't actually exist. It kind of makes that up. So then that organization is going to go forward. They're going to build potentially a whole proposal around this grant, spend maybe 20 hours on this application, get a bunch of people putting things together. And then later they're going to discover that was actually a hallucination. This grant doesn't exist. AI made it up. And then that is 20 hours of time that people already didn't have that's gone on actually doing that. So really the thing to remember, AI is really your assistant. It's a research assistant and it's not a fact checker. So what you can do to mitigate this, just add a 5 to 10 minute human review at the end of every AI output. What are the red flags that mean verify this? You can watch out for like highly specific numbers without sources, and poke on that and say, where did this number come from? If there are claims that sound maybe a little too perfectly aligned with what you're trying to do, or what you want to hear, look for where that came from, look for sources. So adding that 5 to 10 minute human review to every output can help you just verify that information, make sure you don't, put out anything that's inaccurate or waste any time. And then one thing is using AI for amplification and never for actually editing humanity. I think this is a piece that's, again, super important for World Pulse community. If you look at this slide here, you're seeing two versions of the same story side by side. And if you look at these, what you're seeing is the first one is kind of sanitized, kind of generic. It says, the implementation of a new dam has led to suboptimal water management. Okay, fine. But then if you look at the second one, what you're seeing here is a real voice. It's someone who's really experiencing this. And you're going to see that it's a little bit more, thought-provoking. You can see in this one, it says the river that fed our grandparents' crops is being choked by concrete and our village is left thirsty. If you look at these two options, which one moves you? Which one would really resonate with other community members or even with a donor or even a journalist to pick up? The power of World Pulse, again, is that it comes from those authentic voices from people and from communities. And so the best use of AI here is going to preserve the original voice while still making it shareable across barriers. So I would recommend instead using AI to do things like creating captions, creating short social media versions of this when needed, and even putting it in accessible formats, all while keeping those original words and power intact. All right, so far we've talked about using AI tools for kind of one-off questions. You ask a question, AI answers. Jelle went through what it looks like to use an agent, and he did already kind of go through what makes agents different. Agents aren't just answering a question, they are often accessing different tools, different data, they're doing reasoning, they're doing planning, and then they're coming back with a response or actually doing something on your behalf. And so obviously, you know, we wouldn't be here today if we didn't believe all of that was powerful. I think it really is for World Pulse community and members. You know, we just saw in Jelle's post or in Jelle's presentation there. But when something runs autonomously, it can also do a lot of damage autonomously and on its own. And so you really need some physical guardrails that are built into the system from the start. And so if we look at what a couple of those are, first is what we call least privilege access. This might be a new term to a lot of you. But say you build an agent that can monitor public government policy sites. You say that's all it should do, right? It should just be monitoring for information and potentially alert you to any changes. But say when you're setting that up, you accidentally give it access to a sensitive Google Drive. Maybe it has access to contact information, addresses, locations of people that you work with. Well, now your agent has the keys to both public information and to that sensitive data. And so as you can imagine, if that agent is to fall into the wrong hands, or that platform gets compromised, all that sensitive data is at risk of being exposed. And so the principle here, again, is least privilege access. You want that agent to have access to as little as possible, only what it needs to do its job. And so before you deploy any agent, before you start hooking it up to different tools, to different data sets, allowing it to do things, just quickly ask yourself, you know, what databases should this agent actually be able to access? Is it a nice to have for it to access this thing, or is it absolutely critical for it to have access to? Ask yourself if it could pull some potentially sensitive data, and who else has access to what it produces. And many platforms, including Make, which Jelle just went over, they actually let you set some permission boundaries from the start here and build those in from day one. So it's not something that you know, you need to kind of build from scratch. Guardrail 2 is what we're calling human in the loop, and it is exactly what it sounds like. It is putting a human in the loop for all of these actions. And this is another principle where it's like adding 5 to 10 minutes to review something can save, you know, 5 to 10 hours of, you know, recovery from something goes wrong. So here's how this one would work. Say your agent is searching for new grants every week, matching your focus area. Say it goes out and it finds, you know, 5 opportunities, and it's going to draft a 1-page summary of each of those. Instead of automatically sending those summaries out to your whole team, the agent might send a private Slack channel or email marked for your review. So it's going to say, hey, before I send out these summaries to the entire team, can you just take a look at them and make sure that everything looks correct? So you spend about 2 minutes doing that human verification, performing that human in the loop, looking at, you know, if these grants actually exist, do the links work, all of that, and then you approve it. And then the agent can go out and it can finish doing your work. And so again, this is a situation where a 10-minute review can potentially save you a lot of hours on the back end, and is a good example of, you know, working smarter and not harder in this situation. And the good news is, as with the last thing we talked about, many of these no-code platforms, again, like Make, they let you build in those approval steps without any additional coding or coding experience. And then finally, before we get into a couple of use cases, this is kind of the core responsibility question we have here. When does an agent suggest something versus when does it decide something? So if we look at this table here, right, every single one of these decisions where we're asking an agent to do something should be no. The agent shouldn't be deciding. It should really just be suggesting things for us. So if an agent finds grant opportunities, you decide which one of those to actually pursue. Your agent could translate a community story, but the community member, actually needs to validate the translation, actually, to make sure that it's still correct or still preserving that human element. And then if an agent maybe flags a policy threat, a strategy team needs to decide on what the response to that is. And so if an agent acts autonomously, but you couldn't explain why it did something, if you were asked directly, the guardrails are probably a little bit too weak. And so again, agent's job here is really to go out, gather intelligence, and suggest things to you. Your job is to work alongside this agent and actually make those decisions, validate things, and take responsibility. So we're going to go through just a couple of, common use cases for these AI agents. I'll show you what this might look like. So this is an example, say you work on a women's land rights issue in Southeast Asia, right? You might set up an agent with some criteria where you tell it exactly that. And you want to get a grant potentially in the neighborhood of, 50,000 to 500,000. You could set up an agent that's going to run every week. It can search a public grant database. It can search funding sites and actually output those curated grant opportunities and do one-page summaries for each. So the guardrails we would put in place here is that those summaries, again, don't go straight out to the whole team. They route to a private Slack channel, and then someone on the team actually spends some time validating those before they go out and people start actually responding to those grants and putting in the time and effort. Another use case and where we would see this come up, if you imagine, a new government bill comes out, right? Like say it's a pretty dense, 50-page government bill, and it's maybe about, new environmental requirements, right? You probably don't have time to read all 50 pages of this new government bill, but you do need to know, how might this affect women farmers in your region? How might this affect indigenous communities? How might this affect, youth and, education among girls, right? So maybe you have an AI policy decoder that can process that bill, and it can do that in just a few minutes, and it can give you analysis of that. Well, now your strategy team kind of has what they need. Again, we were talking about AI can make recommendations, but you should ultimately be the one that makes the decisions and validates those things. And so with that, you can kind of understand the implications, and then you can decide which of these gaps really matter the most for what we are trying to do and the impact we're trying to make. What should our response be to this government bill? And then how do we ultimately go out and frame this to our communities and actually mobilize and get some action going? And so that's all your decision to make. But as you'll see here, AI did the heavy lifting of actually reading and analyzing that for you and giving you the key bullet points. And then the last use case I'll go through here, say you have a really powerful piece of content. Maybe it is a blog post from a community member about how climate change, destroyed traditional farming practices in their community. Say it's a really authentic story. It's really compelling. You really love it. It's exactly the kind of story that's, going to move people and create change. So instead of just posting that once on the website, right? An agent could actually generate multiple formats of that. Maybe it generates, 5 to 10 social media posts of different lengths for LinkedIn or for other social media sites. Maybe it generates a one-page summary that maybe gets to be sent up to policymakers, or a Q&A format for activists to actually use when they're organizing things. So a simple text version for context with low bandwidth access as well. Maybe that's something that it could generate. But the guardrail here, again, is that the agent goes ahead and it formats that message, but you, the human, again, using that human in the loop, you're going to go in and you're going to make sure that tone is still authentic. You're going to decide which versions of this to publish. You may even actually go back and forth with that AI agent to make sure that, you're editing things and you're really striking the right balance of tone and making things short and getting the right context out there. And so what this agent isn't doing is changing the core message of that post, because we want to preserve that. It's really adapting it so that it can reach more people in different contexts, potentially. And so this is the pattern, what you're seeing here across all of these 3 use cases. And what changes with AI is that it's going to do a lot of the work that takes time, but not the work that really takes judgment. So things like repetition, formatting, monitoring, and research, all really great work for AI agents, and you should absolutely rely on them so that you can do more. But things that require, wisdom, credibility, and authentic voice, things that require strategy, validation, decision-making, those should come from you. And so AI can really help you with those pieces of it and work alongside with you. And so what that means is that a small team or just one person that's maybe been doing work with limited resources can suddenly start to move at the speed of, much larger organizations or people who maybe have more resources. You can start to do more and build credibility and keep up relationships with communities. And then I will end on this, which is like, we just learned a lot of stuff. We just talked about a lot of things, but what can you actually do? How can you actually get started? So my advice would be like, don't try to automate everything at once. Start really slow and just, day by day or month by month, kind of learn new things and automate some things. I would say for step one, pick one bottleneck, right? Like pick one thing that's really repetitive or a time-consuming task that takes a lot of time. Maybe that's grant research or translating policy documents. Maybe it's adapting content for different contexts. Pick one thing and then try one tool, right? Maybe you try Make, since that's what we saw today, and you try an automation, spend an hour playing with it and just see what it can do. And as we saw today, you don't need to be a tech expert to do this. Just go in there and play around and explore a little bit. And then for step 3, I would say like be mindful of one guardrail, right? We learned about least privilege access, only giving agents access to what they need. We learned about human in the loop, making sure there's always a human kind of validating things. And then we learned about just making sure you're preserving the authenticity of messaging. So put one of those guardrails in place and put yourself as kind of that lock between the AI output and the actual execution of it. Review it, approve it, and things like that. So that is my advice for kind of starting small. With that wraps up my piece. Want to go to Q&A from there, Morgan?
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you so much. This was recorded, and we have people online from Liberia and Pakistan, and I know that there's going to be hundreds more on our platform that are going to be excited to see this. So does anyone have any questions right now? And feel free to enter them in the chat or jump off mute. And get us started. For myself, this was really interesting, and I was wondering if you all have any advice on how to look through your processes and things that you're doing to determine upfront what maybe you should automate first. I know you talked a little bit about that, but a holistic like organization maybe look at it.
I think from my perspective, it would be, it needs to be probably a process that you can explain. So, because you need to be able to tell however you're going to input it, what it needs to do. But then the other key piece of it is you probably get the most value if it is repetitive, if you don't like doing it, and if it takes a lot of your time. So anything that you do often, but you can also explain, this is what I do, would probably be a good indicator. And if you really want to get into it, there's exercises where you can break processes down. If you, for example, would Google that, it's called a lean exercise, or there's other practices where you can do that for. But Mallory, anything to add?
Yeah, I would add also like use AI to learn AI. So like today I've like just in my work life, I've been setting some things up with Claude Code. But on the side, I've been chatting with regular Claude, quote unquote, to say like, hey, I want to do this. How would you set this up in Claude Code? And it kind of can give you step-by-step instructions. So yeah, I would say like, whether you're starting small or going big, like you can chat with, Gemini or Claude or whoever to say, this is what I want to do. Can you help walk me through how to do it? And that's going to make it a lot more approachable.
Awesome. Very helpful. Lourdes, I saw you come off mute. I don't know if you have any thoughts or questions that might represent what some of us are thinking.
Oh, no, I'm just excited that this is going to go to many people within the community, because the examples that you share, I think they are great in terms of very practical, that many women are looking for grants. It takes a lot of time to find the right places where that is. So I love that. I also love that how you share how to do the agent on Make, but through Claude, because Claude is accessible on your mobile. So the chat can be created there. You don't need to have access to a computer with a full view of Make and to make decisions there that is really hard to see. But even just by having access through your mobile to the chat, you can create that and have that solution ready for you. So I think that that's really valuable as well for many women around the world that are not that do not have access to a computer, or are actually working on the ground in day-to-day activities, and they still need to find those grants. They still need to do advocacy and share their findings and their stories, as you share, Mallory, on how to create different versions of one same story for different platforms. So yeah, I'm excited to see as well the conversations section on platform, where everybody can share their questions and comments on this. I do think, and I dropped this question out there. If you're seeing this training and you want to see this on WordPulse, I think that also some introduction to computational thinking, what is that step-by-step thinking when you're doing things, could help a lot to understand even what are repetitive things. Something that gets you really tired on doing it, that's fine. But many times, because it's a core of your project, you don't identify that as repetitive. There are different changes on the things that you do, and it's hard to see that it's actually a repetitive action that an agent can create. So if you like to have more on that step-by-step thinking, let us know, and we can create a whole training on that. Rasika, you want to wrap us out if no one has questions?
Sure. Yeah, if no one else has any questions or comments to share, I just want to say that was an extremely insightful session, Jelle and Mallory. I feel like we learned so much about AI in just 1 hour. So thank you. We truly appreciate all that you do to inspire the WordPulse community and the world at large. So thank you so much for today. And all you community members, thank you all so much for joining in. Please share your feedback and ideas about monthly live events with us by using the chat bubble on the website. We also request you to take the poll through the chat. Before we close out, I'd like to share a gentle reminder that we have our encourager parties on the second Thursday every month, our Tech4Good Thursdays on the third Thursday of every month, and our Training Tuesdays on the last Tuesday of every month. So you can register for these events through the WordPulse platform. If you want to reach out to us with any questions or comments or feedback about the session, feel free to do so. You can always do that by reaching out to us. And I want to thank you all once again for joining us. And we hope to see you all next month on April 16th for the next Tech4Good session. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mallory, Jelle. This was great. Thank you so much.
I have the poll on, so I was waiting a couple minutes.
Got it. See you, Martha.
Yeah, I'll see you later. I was waiting in case people were doing the poll.
Yeah. Thank you for an amazing session. Yeah.
See you
bye.
next time. Yeah, that was great. Okay. Bye.